Are you looking for a fun and informative podcast all about training working dogs? Look no further than the LWDG Pod Dog. This weekly show is hosted by me, Joanne Perrott, founder of the Ladies Working Dog Group, and I chat to experienced trainers and experts in the field who will give you helpful tips and advice. Whether you're just getting started or you've been working dogs for years, this podcast will have something for you. So pull up a chair, pour yourself a cup of coffee and tune in to LWDG Pod Dog and let us help you build a better bond with your best friend. Hello and welcome to another episode of LWDG Pod Dog. This week we're going to be speaking with guest expert Georgie Armstrong from K9 BrainTraining about some of the similarities and differences between training a gun dog and training a search and rescue dog. How are you today, Georgie?
I'm great, thank you.
I'm so excited to talk to you about this because obviously, I hope by now I know quite a lot about gun dog training, but I don't really know a lot about search and rescue training. And I watch like my friends who've got like mountain rescue dogs and different types of dogs and people who work in the police. And I think, how exactly are we training them? So I'm going to ask you lots of questions about like the similarities and differences between training both. But before we get into that, tell me about your background. How did you even get involved in all this?
So I got involved in this. So I went to work on a farm and they had labs that were working the cattle and working the sheep. And up until then, I just thought of labs as sort of house dogs that got a bit overweight. Like I had nothing to do with them. And I was like, wow, they're brilliant. And the dog that we used to work the cows and the sheep with had a litter. So of course I had a pup from that litter, and I started actually training him as a gun dog, not having a clue. I think I was about 19, I think then, and I had a terrier, and that was it. That we'd grown up with dogs, we'd grown up with collies, but I had a terrier, and I got this working lab, and I thought, I'd seen all these well-behaved Labradors wandering around. And this lab hit 12 months old, and I was like, oh my God, what have I done? And he started barking. He used to bark, so I took him and did just some fun scurries and things like that. And he was absolutely brilliant, but he started yipping and then he started barking. And at the time, I didn't have a clue, how to train that out of him or not. I obviously didn't want to use anything aversive. And at the time, it was all aversive, that the advice I was being given. And I actually just went to a guide dogs fun day, and there was a search and rescue team there that had a stand, and they had a sign up and it said, does your dog like a tennis ball? And I was like, oh yes. So I went over to the stand and spoke to them, and I said, look, he absolutely loves it, he'll search for the ball or the dummy. And I said, but he barks. And they were like, absolutely perfect. When our dogs find a person, they bark. So that was how I started it. I joined a team, went and did some training with them. So when you join a team first, you have to go on what's called dog's body for them. So you hide for their dogs, and then you can have your own dog assessed and start training your own dog. So that's how I started, and that was search and rescue. So Dexter he was just coming up for 2, I think, when I started training him with them, and it was very much the first sort of work to do with search dogs that I'd done. So I just listened and did as I was told, and then I gradually started to get questions in my head about what if I did it this way, or why do we do it this way? And a few times I sort of got, which I think with a lot of training sometimes you just get, well, that's how we do it. And I was like, okay, there must be other ways. And so I travelled. So I was living down near Berkshire and Oxfordshire then, and I travelled up to Wales, Ireland, Scotland, and the Lake District quite a lot to train with the mountain rescue teams and the search dogs up there, and started to learn there's a hell of a lot more that goes into this than I know, and I got really, really hooked on it. And then, so whilst training Dexter, I was very lucky with Dexter, like search and rescue was the perfect thing for him. He was an air scent dog, what's called an air scent dog. So he'll search for any human scent. So you wouldn't search like an urban environment with him. It would be out on the hill or in the woods. And he'll find any person, but obviously you're usually out at night. So hopefully it is the person that you want to find that you come across, not some person that's camping in the woods and gets a bit of a scare. So I was training him. And then whilst I was out in Ireland on a training exercise, one of the guys out there had a drowned victim search dog. So she searched on a boat for drowned victims. She'd also search on land. And I was like, wow, this is unbelievable. How can a dog pick up the scent of a person that's under the water, like 40 meters under the water? So I was like, right, my next dog, that's what I want to do. So I looked for a dog that was doing that already and was like, right, when this dog has a litter, I want, a puppy from this litter. So then I got my Springer, Tula. And so obviously when you start training a search and rescue dog that searches for live people, it's really easy because the people can just run away from the dog with a toy and go and hide, and the dog goes to find them. So it's quite an easy way to start the training and build it up. Whereas obviously with dead bodies, you can't do that. It doesn't work. So that's when it sort of started to cross over into more of the detection side of things, like similar to explosives. So when the dog gets imprinted on a scent, so they get conditioned to a scent, exactly the same as, expo or drugs. So I started going to other trainers that trained detection, as opposed to just the search and rescue. And then I realized there's this whole massive world of pet dogs, sport dogs, operational dogs, all doing. So with pet and sport, it tends to get called more scent work. And I realized that whilst I've been teaching people with their dogs sort of fun search and rescue, like hide and seek, with your dogs in the woods, I could actually teach in the dry in a village hall or similar, and not be out sort of on Salisbury Plain getting soaking wet every weekend, which obviously a lot of other people didn't particularly want to do. And I didn't also have to rope people in to go and hide for all the dogs. I could just put odor out. So that's when I then started canine brain training. So all the search and rescue stuff's voluntary. So I was traveling everywhere and it was obviously costing me lots of money. And I was like, right, I've got to do something about this. So started canine brain training from there and started teaching. I went and did my instructor qualification abroad because I wanted to do a qualification. So I did my instructor course, my stages over a year, whereas I found in the UK, most of the courses were sort of 1 to 2 day courses. And I really wanted to make sure I was, doing it properly and getting the experience I needed. And so I started canine brain training and went full time with it, I think in 2015, I think it was.
Like, listening to you, I'm already incredibly fascinated. I was incredibly fascinated from the first sort of line of, I went to work on a farm where there was a Labrador herding cattle and sheep, because I have never seen that, just like you've never seen that. But I suppose we don't realize the unlimited potential a dog has to work doing lots of different things, isn't it? We've maybe got somewhat, I think it's definitely falling away now, because we've got the idea of this sort of multidisciplined dog now, can do loads and loads of things, can be a gun dog on a Saturday, can be canicross on a Monday, can be something else on a Tuesday, and they thrive on it. So, but the idea of the traditional roles, they're quite set really when you think of like a lab, don't you? You don't think of a lab as a working farm dog.
No, not at all. And I hadn't, it made perfect sense as well, because I mean, it's Judy at Butt's Farm. If anyone wants to go and see the Labradors working the dogs, working the sheep, but she did have obviously collies as well. But it worked perfectly, because if you had like if the cows were a bit spooky or they were new or something like that, the labs were just a lot more steady. So like Peach, Dexter's mum, she used to just move them a lot more steady, and they just sort of, everything just was a little bit calmer. And then if she needed, obviously, that dog to really run out, a long way to the sheep or the cows, then the collies were obviously in their element. But no, it did work really well. And I think the thing with the labs is they've got something with people. They've got, so for me, for an air scent dog, like for a live person search dog, there's some fantastic breeds doing it. I've seen lots and lots of different breeds, lots of gundog breeds. So lots of collies and lots of gundog breeds. So springers, pointers, Wieslers. But for me, it'd be a lab. If it's live people, it'd be a lab. I just feel like they've just got that sort of connection with people. Yeah, definitely. No, they're brilliant.
You invested a lot of time and money into volunteering to go and do what is incredible work. Search and rescue is something I'm always amazed by, the amount of things that go on in the UK to really help people, like the RNLI, like Mountain Rescue, like Search and Rescue, where they run on a voluntary charity basis, but do such incredible work. And they are the people that many times our police forces, our ambulance forces, our fire service will call in to do a rescue that they are not trained to do. Do you think as you were doing that work, it kept on broadening your mind into like all these different things a dog can do?
Yeah, definitely. The water stuff was massive. When I first found out about that, I was just completely mind blown. So I knew about cadaver dogs already, so searching for victims on land. But when I went out and saw the dogs working on the boat, I was just like, this is nuts. There was so my dog, when she was a baby, we just put her out on the boat. The other dogs were out there doing assessments and things like that, but I'd just gone to learn, and she happened to come with me. And there was a hide out in, I think it was Lochrie in Ireland, and it was 2.5 years old and 40 meters underwater. And she knocked it like she would, when I train at home. She was no different. When I've taken her abroad and worked her on live scent, so human, because in the UK you can't obviously work on the human tissue because of the Human Tissue Act. So I've taken her abroad, and the first time she worked on real, as it were, abroad, she was no different. She just indicated perfectly. Like it's quite addictive, but it is a bit weird when you get a text every now and again that's like, I'm going to the dentist, do you want my teeth? Or something like that. I think I remember when I was first with my other half, I think that's what happened. He said, you've got a message on your phone of someone just asking if you want their teeth. And I was like, yeah, that's normal, that's fine.
Yeah, because like I'm sure there are loads of listeners thinking, oh my God, this is like fascinating, a little bit like, not gruesome, it's not the word gruesome, because the work that these dogs do is so valuable, but it is a little bit like unexpected to say, like, oh, my dog's a gun dog, my dog's a canicross dog, or my dog searches for dead people underwater. It's like, it's a bit of a shock to the system. But I suppose if you like start looking at like the similarities, when we send a dog out to find a dead bird on water, I'm always fascinated, because I think, well, how do they even know what it is? The water moves around frequently. How do they even trace that? But when you're then talking about a dog being able to mark on a tissue like underwater at a severe depth, it shows you their capability, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. It's so the odor, the scent, the human scent travels through the water, so it goes through. So when you've got current underneath and the wind on top, you've got like another dimension, as it were, to the search, because obviously the current can pull the odor down, and then the wind can be bringing it the opposite direction. So, and also the dog's on a boat, so the dog can't move. So obviously when you're working on land, you put your dog out, obviously you watch your springer, quarter, you can see them hit the scent cone, they work it towards wherever the bird might be, and exactly the same for any odor. Whereas on the boat, they can't. they can't say, can you turn me left or right? It doesn't work like that. So that also taught me more than anything else I've been doing to read my dog, because if I didn't read my dog, we wouldn't find. Whereas obviously on the land with Dexter, if I didn't see him pick up odor, he'd go anyway. He'd go to that scent regardless. Whereas if I miss it with her, you've missed it. And if you're on, we train up on Ullswater in the Lake District, for example, it's like you miss it, you've got a hell of a lot of lake before you're going to get back to where that is. And I think you definitely have to have a certain type of dog, not necessarily breed, but the way they are, the way they think. I think they've got to be a certain type of dog to sort of to do that, really.
I think when you look at the working breeds, there is something in their eyes and their facial expressions that just says, I am so switched on, you don't even know how switched on I am.
Yeah, definitely.
When you sort of obviously you've got search and rescue dogs, and we're talking about gun dogs. Do you train gun dogs, or is it just search and rescue dogs?
Yeah, so when I met Dylan, my other half, he shoots, and he had Betsan. She's now 3. She was a young lab. So he would beat with her, and she went on his sort of little syndicate shoot with him. I had a very different view about like shooting and gun dog work, because I'd only worked on the shoots sort of down south on massive shoots in sort of the organisation, like catering side of it almost. So for me, having my main pleasure, like standing on the side of a mountain and watching my dog work miles away from me, pick up the scent of a person, I'd only seen like gun dogs sort of picking up in a fairly flat field, super obedient, which is, I now understand, completely needed in that environment. But at the time I had almost quite a stubborn view about it, I think, because I was like, oh no, they don't have any fun. They just have to sit and be really well behaved and then just retrieve. And then when I came up to Wales, I went out beating with him and was like, wow, like they have to actually search. And then the dogs obviously that pick up here, the shoots are in the valleys or on the side of the mountains. And I was like, this isn't that different. And it was a real sort of eye opener. So now, yeah, we've got Oak, who's 6 months. He's going to be quite interesting, because with the SAR stuff, which I'm sure we'll go into, I'm much less obedience, independent dog, needs to just search. And then obviously with the gun dog stuff, I completely understand that you need like a high level of obedience with your dog. It can't just run in on 500 birds in front of everyone else. So Oak is a lab. He's 6 months, so he will hopefully pick up for us. So training him is going to be quite interesting, because obviously it's going to be a lot of similarities with a lot of differences. And then Dylan's just got a little Irish Springer. So she's got fab line, generations and generations of dogs that beat and pick up. So we're going into it a lot more now. And every time I do it, I learn about both, see the similarities, see the differences. Betsan, our lab, she was super obedient, and then we got to a point where she wasn't as interested, so she didn't want to go out and pick the dummies up. And I then pulled from the detection, the search side of it. I was like, well, I think we just need to make it more fun for her. We'd sort of thought so much about the discipline, as it were, of like, how she needs to be on a shoot. And she's very, very strong-willed, very clever dog. And she's like, wow, I don't know why I would do this then, really, if it's not that fun for me. So we took it right back to just searching out on the field for a ball, really made it fun for her. And that was from my search and rescue side. So I was like, or detection, I'm not, they have to have the value in the reward. So for us to go out, they're not going out and searching for hours for a dead body or a person. They're going out because when they find that person, they get their toy, and they get their reward. So I took that and then we put that to her. And obviously now, yeah, she's a super happy little dog. And so yeah, worked really well.
You make a really valid point there, because a lot of us, when we first come into gun dog training, and there is so much information like online with trainers, and it is really hit and miss. You will either find somewhere that teaches you it can be fun, you can get just as much a result with it being fun, or you might accidentally fall upon a very traditional trainer where there is no fun, there is just do. And like you said, by being able to bring in fun, you kept the dog excited about it, and you've made really valid points. Like, what is the point in it for the dog if the dog has no enjoyment out of the end result?
Exactly, yeah. And that's, yeah, I see it all the time when I teach pet dogs, sport dogs, operational dogs. That'll be, they search, they know where the odor is, but they're not telling me where it is, or they won't stay on their alert. So the SAR dogs for life people, they'll go out, they'll search for the person, they find the person, and usually, so they'll either have what's called a standover bark, so they'll stay with the person, with the body, and bark until the handler gets there, or they'll do what's called a refind, so they'll come back, bark at the handler, or some of them jump, it depends on what indication that person has, and then they'll take the handler back to the person, so they know where they are. And obviously the search part, easy, that's fine, and it would move very quickly to the dog finds where we're doing really long searches, but they're not indicating, they're not coming back and telling me where they are. And it is the foundations of that reward. If the dog's not getting, the dog will go out and search, because obviously that's great fun for the dog. But when it comes to the sort of the bit that's not as natural for the dog, like, right, okay, I've got to go back, tell the handler, then come back in. They're only going to do that if they're doing that for a massive reward at the end of the game. And it's the foundations that one of the team, the Lakes dog team, are absolutely brilliant at putting in the foundations on the reward with the dog. So it's generally a toy, because obviously the person can have a lot of interaction with the dog. So like tuggy or something like that, they can have a real game with the dog. But I have it with my detection dogs, and all my clients, I try and say, you need to vary it, you need to do more, and you can do it with food. A trainer that I worked with came up with a really good way of remembering it. He said to me, try 3 different things every time you reward your dog. Doesn't matter if it's the same reward, like if it's food, because obviously a lot of my clients, their dogs don't particularly like toys. Maybe do 3 different things with it. So like if it's a ball, you can do throw it into the long grass, so they're almost getting a search as their reward still. You can bounce it, you can get them to sit and stare. So our indication for detection is like a passive sit and stare, like the expo dogs. You can do that, and then they get the ball, but try and do 3 different things with it, and then you've probably given your dog enough reward, or more of a reward than you would have. It's so common that I see the dog finds and indicates, it's like, yeah, well done, here's a treat. And then they'll go and chat to the person next to them about how they did it, or, X, Y, Z, what might have happened.
Absolutely love that. That's going to be like the top tip so far. But I really love it, and I've never actually thought of that. We give a reward, it's one reward. There's cool concept like just doing some more stuff with the reward, so the reward is even more rewarding. Is just so great, isn't it? Sometimes the littlest tweak to the way we do something can make such a massive impact on the results, can't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think in probably every seminar or lesson I go and do, I will say, if someone was paying me a £5 to do something, I'd probably do it, or I might not bother. If I was getting 50 quid, I'd probably be a lot more shaft to go and do it and do a better job. So I think it's really, really important. And you do get the dogs, like, you know, I'm really lucky with Tula, my Springer. She will work all day, and I'm pretty sure she takes her reward just to please me. I think she has a little fluffy Kong toy that fits in my life jacket, and she'll play with it for a minute, and then she's like, right, come on, let's just get on with the job. You know, I don't need to, I'll play with this for you if it makes you happy because you think I'm rewarding you, that's fine. But like, definitely a primary reinforcer is to actually search and be out doing the work. But most dogs, yeah, they will get to a point where they sort of just suddenly think, hang on a minute, what is in this for me? Or they'll find their own reward. That's obviously the other thing that I get with search dogs. And I'm sure, and I've heard a lot of people, you know, with gun dogs, my dog just goes off and hunts by itself. So they'll then seek their own reward, and then you're in a real deep hole trying to get out of that.
Yeah, and it's really interesting, the comparisons there, and again the similarities. You know, when a dog self-rewards, you've got to have something incredibly special to get it back from self-rewarding to rewarding with you. And I like what you were just saying there about your dog going, oh, yeah, come on then, let's reward mum by actually playing with her. Yes, you've been a good handler. But yeah, it is this concept that you've got to find the reward that suits the dog, and you.
Massively, yeah, definitely. I do, you know, we do a lot with that, and I do a lot with that, you know, with my young dogs. And I don't mind what the dog has as its reward. Obviously, puppies, as they get older, they change. You know, sometimes when they're really little, they're not as interested in toys so much. Or I think you can really overdo it with toys sometimes. You know, if you do, I try and sort of stick to, if I'm doing retrieves, it's like 3 retrieves per little session if we're playing or anything, you know, not even necessarily working. And that's it, because I think you can definitely sort of, you know, they get off, this is not fun, I'm just going backwards and forwards. But yeah, definitely work out what works for those dogs. I think I've actually just, because Tula now, so we had COVID, and then she had a litter, so and we're due a baby as well, so we're not going back into such rescue anytime soon. So I took her out at the end of last season, just on sort of a clean-up day, like beating, and she absolutely loves it. But obviously, because I've trained her to clear huge areas, it's really different for her, because I need to keep her obviously a lot closer to me. And where she's not, she is foodie, you know, if you're in the house, you can do training with her and things like that. But she's very much, I know my job, you know, I don't need to do anything else. So I've just ordered now, like the squeaky rabbit skins on the end of a long tuggy, just to see if actually, you know, playing with her with that gets her more engaging, because I need to work on her closeness to me. Now when she works, you know, she'll be changing completely, and it's just trying new things. And she's nearly 7, you know, it doesn't matter what age the dog is, you definitely want to get that. You know, Dexter was obsessed with tennis balls, and I was like, well, there's no way I can only have a tennis ball reward for people, because tennis balls are everywhere. He finds one on every single walk. So the Kong squeaky tennis balls, that is what he gets when he finds a person, you know, and that's the only time he has it, because then the reward becomes higher value. I think quite a lot people are like, oh, my dog doesn't really like toys, you know, it's not got a specific toy that I can play with it with. And it's like, well, is your house, you know, have you got toys out in the house? It's like, yeah, they're everywhere. It's like, well, if they're out and everywhere, it's not really got any reason to go, oh my God, we're playing with that toy. So I do tend to encourage my clients to try and find something exciting for the dog that then comes out, like when they're working. Because I think that definitely, it's like when the gun dogs, you get the dummy bag out and they're like, yes, I know exactly what we're doing today.
Someone once taught me, and I say it all the time to my kids, it drives them mad, is if there's biscuits in the biscuit barrel, what's the point in biscuits? And it's quite true. If the biscuit barrel is full all the time, nobody wants them. You let that go empty for a month or two and then put in some like rich teas. Everyone wants a rich tea, but it is that thing, isn't it? If we've got constant access to something, it loses all its like excitement altogether. When Sporting Saint came to us and asked us about coming up with a product for them, the tennis ball, I don't know if you've seen it, we came up with like tennis ball wrap.
Yeah, the wrap.
Yeah, and the whole reason that we came up with that, and came up with it as a group, is like, it is that whole thing, isn't it? Dogs are obsessive almost with tennis balls, but not so much with dummies. So if you can get that bit on there, and again, we see huge difference because we've just brought a different excitement to a canvas dummy for a gun dog. And it's that aligning completely to what you were saying, which is it's just making what you're doing that bit more exciting, that bit more fun, that bit where you can say to the dog, well, okay, you can self-hunt, but that's not going to be as fun as you come in and playing with this Kong.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'll have, when I get a dog, so occasionally we have dogs in for training. So for like to go out on a project or something like that. And I will let that dog settle, obviously, and then we'll get out a bucket of toys, and there'll be a rabbit ball in there, a tennis ball, a Kong, maybe a tuggy, just a few different bits, and then engage with the dog with them all, and they just pick the one they want. They pick the one that works for them. And there are the dogs that one day it's one thing and one day it's not. I've got a Springer that comes to me, and she comes with treats and a tennis ball and a soft squeaky squirrel, because one day she'll get the tennis ball out and he'll go mental, and then the next day she'll get the tennis ball out and he'll look at her like, what's that? I just want treats right now. Why are you getting this ball out for me? But it is nice when you can get you can get them on a toy, and you do have to watch their arousal level. One of my pointers was absolutely obsessed with Kong, to the point where, on a search, if he had his Kong during a search or something, if we were searching for two, he was on pyrotechnics, so we'd do more than one find. He couldn't think then, he just went over the top, couldn't think. So I used to reward him differently. And then at the end, he could have his Kong. And he actually ended up, he had it with food, when he went back in the car, in the van. So it's finding that level of like really high reward, but not something that sends them completely over the top that they then can't think either, or possibly, using it at the end rather than halfway through.
We've talked a little bit about like the similarities. We've talked about like obedience, and the differences in the obediences and the similarities in it. And we've talked quite a lot about how, your stories are fantastic. I'm enjoying every single one of them. I could spend all day talking to you about the stories and how you train them. But, and we've talked about how with the training program, for both, there's similarities, but it's about being structured in your training and training the dogs to do a job, but understanding it doesn't matter what age they are, what they're going to do. You can train them in an organized approach, can't you?
Oh yeah, definitely. So we'll have stages, like official stages technically, that the dogs need to reach within training. So they'll have, their evaluations and their stage 1, 2 and 3, for example. And then obviously the puppies. So I try and work on the puppies, and I know we're going to talk about cognition in a different seminar, so we're in a different podcast probably, so I won't go into it, but the dog's ability to problem solve and use their inference, for me, for learning, is much more beneficial than using the handler, and them using their memory. So those dogs that, they'll remember the length of time they were searching for, or they'll remember how far out you threw the dummy the last 3 times. It's not as helpful as those dogs that will just go out and problem solve themselves. So I've seen it like in search and rescue, when you'll work a dog, and if you've hidden a person behind a fallen down tree 4 or 5 times, and that dog's got really high memory, generally they'll clock a fallen down tree and just go and check behind it anyway. So I like to work on my dog's ability to problem solve. So all they're searching for is that odor. They're not thinking, oh, it was here last time, or we only did 3 runs last time, or it was only 100 meters away, or whatever it might be. I just want them to work on that. So I focus on their natural hunt drive first. So just little, and obviously it's the same with the gun dogs. It just depends on what they're doing as to how far out they'll be searching away from me. Whether they're for gun dog work, whether it's for detection or a person, it always varies. And then I like them to learn the foundations, and so the obedience side of it, to work it out themselves almost, so I'll just wait and they'll sit, and then I'll throw it back out, and they're learning themselves, right, okay, you sat down quietly and it got thrown out. When I was messing about on the end of the lead, crazy excited, if I'd let the dog off then to go out and search for the ball or whatever it might be, then that's exactly what they're going to do the next time. So rather than putting in, so I didn't used to put in hardly any obedience with my dogs at all, because I wanted them to work away from me, independently. They know where the odor is, I don't. And we were obviously working much bigger areas. I didn't have any of the worries of, being in the right place for the birds or anything like that. I just had a woodland search for a person, or a lake. And then obviously recall is really, really important. And we also stock test them. So they have to be okay around stock, and they obviously have to be okay around people. But I didn't used to put in a lot of the obedience, and then obviously realized I think there's definitely more involved in the gun dogs. You definitely need a bit more obedience, but I think it's actually the way they're taught it. So I have a lot of dogs now, a bit like what you were saying about the multidiscipline stuff, that come to me, and they're not operational detection dogs or search dogs. They are sport dogs. They're doing agility. They might do gun dog work as well, or canicross. And you have to have obedience with all those things. Some people do trick work with their dogs, or obedience, huge, really high level of obedience, and then they want their dog to go out and search independently in a builder's yard and not look to them for direction. And I think it's the way it's taught. So if you let them sort of self-discover and let them learn themselves how far they need to be working away from you, and that they can problem solve on their own, they don't need to come and get you to do it, because we are so, we love helping our dogs. And the amount of times I have handlers that, that they'll know where it is and they'll direct the dog wherever it might be. As soon as that dog gets into a problem, it'll just go straight back to the handler. Right, tell me where you want me to go then, because you did last time. It got a bit difficult. So I like my dogs to learn and get the confidence that they can do it on their own, while still obviously having the obedience that, I can stop them and not cross a road.
It can be really hard, like you just said, but sometimes what are seconds feel like minutes. I know sometimes I might have put out a blind and I'll take the dog, and I literally have to almost squeeze my hands together and keep my mouth shut, because you want to say, oh, go left, go right, or whatever, whistle them, and you just actually, if I just let them alone, like you said, they'll work it out. If they are miles and miles off it, of course, correct them. But if they're in a rough area, I do my very, very best just to stay quiet and let them, like you said, develop the confidence that if Mama said it's roughly here, it is roughly here.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you can, you don't have to task or direct the dog to help them, just by placing, I use the example, if you're stood in a field or wherever you might be, it's generally got corners, you've got somewhere where you've put it, so you can place your body, so you're making that area smaller for the dog. So without calling the dog in, directing the dog, just by facing the right direction, placing your body in almost making a triangle for that dog to work in, it's going to generally go and work that area, just because of how you're standing. And I always have, with my novice dogs or puppies, I'll always have two, so two balls or two dummies as well. So I'd much rather drop an easier one out without them seeing that they'll then come across, than direct them to the hide, because then, all that confidence and problem solving, you might as well have not bothered to do it in the first place. Whereas if they then still get that find, they've still done it, they've still worked for that period of time. When you start getting that little look back at you, you can see in their face, they're like, oh, I should have found by now, they're getting a little bit anxious before they come back to you for help. I tend to put a second one out so that they find, rather than they get into that habit of, they come back and you have to send them out again. And if they do that, then I know that with that dog, it was a bit long, it's a bit too far. The search was a bit long.
Well, we have so much more we could talk to, right? I am very aware I've kept you for quite a long time, and people who are walking their dogs listening to this, they are definitely getting in extra steps because we've kept them going for probably if anybody wants to find you online, how can people find you if they wanted to talk to you about anything we've discussed so far?
So Canine Brain Training is the easiest one, and that's, you can put Canine Brain Training into Google, Facebook, Instagram, it'll all come up and it all comes to me. So any of those platforms, my website's got contact form that comes straight to my emails, Facebook, Canine Brain Training, and Instagram, Canine Brain Training. So any of those will work and they'll all come straight through to me.
Thank you so much. I've thoroughly, sincerely enjoyed every moment of it. We will definitely, I'm sure, be seeing you do lots of things. I've got 1,000 questions for you offline about dogs, scent, how they smell, everything. I will be picking your brains for days. You have literally blown my mind thinking about the fact of how far underwater they can smell. And if you think about that, sometimes, just to build on your last point, we go in to save them sometimes when, like you said, if they can find something like underwater like that, if we just gave them a little bit more time, they probably would find they smelly dummy. It's just giving them the time to work it out, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I think it's just natural. You just want to help them, especially when they're young, like a little puppy. You're like, oh no, just go this way. Just go over here.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you to all our listeners. I hope you've enjoyed this as much as I've enjoyed recording it. If you want to get a hold of Georgie, please follow the details that she's given. We look forward to speaking to her and to you soon. Goodbye. Thank you for listening to LWDG Pod Dog with me, Jo Parrott. Now, we all know training a dog takes time, energy and patience, but our lives can be really, really busy. Don't worry, the LWDG has got you covered. Join us for our free planning workshop where we'll show you how to use short 10-minute training sessions each day to fast forward your dog's education. Our experts have years of experience in training dogs and will help you get started on the right foot. Register now and start making progress with your furry friend today. Go to our Facebook page, the Ladies Working Dog Group, and click on the pinned post, or visit www.thelwdg.com.